Father's Day is traditionally a time to honor dads, especially those who give of themselves to raise up their children in the way of the Lord. But what about absent dads? What effect does their absence have on their children, especially young boys in need of male guidance and discipline as they move into their teen years and approach adulthood? Here to set us straight is Lee Habeeb. He's executive producer of the new documentary film, The Streets Were My Father, a story of hopelessness and redemption. Lee, as producer of this film, you saw what happens to young boys who grow up without fathers or with dads who are uninvolved in their lives. So what do they have in common? What did you discover about these boys?
Well, what I discovered was that when they grow up in places where a lot of boys don't have fathers, not that individual boy who doesn't have a father living near other families that do, but when they live in places where there aren't fathers, they find community amongst each other in gangs. And this film takes place in the streets of inner city Chicago. One young African-American male finds his way into gangs, a Latino male, and one who's half black and half white. All wanted to fill a void in their lives, all found family in that gang, and sort of male camaraderie. But there was no adult male to teach them how to channel that male rage, that male anger, and all of that testosterone. And of course, that led inevitably to prison. And in and out of prison, these three men went.
Well, it seems that gang leaders do seek out young boys when they are like 9 or 10 years of age, and they become involved in criminal enterprise. Tell us more about what you saw happening in Chicago, where gangs are now responsible for most of the murders there. The murders are now averaging at least 2 per day in Chicago.
Indeed, and it's mostly young men shooting each other, right? And it's not women. I mean, and no one accuses the cops of being anti-men, but 92% of all inmates are male, and almost all of these inmates are between the ages of 18 and 35. And these are the ages where most violent crime is committed. And again, you were right. The older men recruit the younger guys in. They become the padrones, the father in absence. And as these guys get older, they become the fathers, and they recruit the young men.
Well, there are a lot of single mom households out there where fathers aren't present. Of course, the key is men remaining personally involved in their sons' lives, but that's a little more difficult when fathers are separated by distance, say living in another state because of divorce or separation. How can dads be more involved?
Well, in the end, they've got to be present. You hear it from all three of these guys, that longing. At the end of the film, we asked them, what would you say to your father if you had a chance? These guys are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and they're breaking down crying. Be present. And by the way, if somebody doesn't have a father and you live near a boy who doesn't, we as Christians particularly, we can put a body on that boy. We can put a body on him before he becomes a statistic, and we can love him. And that's the charge as Christians anyway, of all of us in our churches, is to put bodies on these young men and these young women who don't have fathers. We know who they are. They're in our community, and they need help. And the valiant single moms who try to do their work and try their best to raise a boy without a father need our help.
And FaceTime makes it a little easier nowadays. Dads who are in another state can communicate with their sons on FaceTime. And all three of these men you profile ended up in prison, as you had mentioned. Let's look at a clip from a segment in the film called A New Beginning.
I don't look at it as a time where I was arrested. I said I was rescued that day. It wasn't until I went to prison, after being there again for a few years, decided that, hey, you know what? Enough is enough.
There was a void in my life, and then I figured it out. I realized it. It was Jesus. I was missing God in my life. I wanted to totally change my life. I just wanted to turn away from who I was and become something new.
I had never really thought about, was there a God, and if so, who was he? And then it started talking about salvation. It said that everybody can be saved, that God loved the world so much that he gave his only son, that whoever would put their faith and trust in him, they would not die eternally, but they would have eternal life. And I thought, man, I want this eternal life.
So, Lee, how important is faith in turning around the lives of the fatherless?
All three of these guys, but for God, they all admit they would have come back again and again and again. God transformed their life. God became the father they never had. and gave them the rules of living, the rules of life, and the rules of loving. As Leslie Williams so beautifully put at the end of this film, the rules of loving. And it's a beautiful thing. God saves. And by the way, we had letters from all kinds of folks who weren't in prison. One executive wrote to us. We had played these on our podcast before they became a film. And he said, I didn't have a father. He told me I would never amount to anything and left. And I worked myself to the bone to prove him wrong. I had 2 divorces. I had no relationship with my kids. And I had created a prison of my own in a very nice office in a very big city. Thank you for sharing your story and these inmate stories. I was an inmate too. I just wasn't in jail. And God freed me from my prison.
Wow. Where can people see the film, Lee?
They can go to salemnow.com. That's salemnow.com and get the film. And remember, Father's Day is a great day for people who had fathers. It's a really tough day for people who don't.
Okay, Lee Habeeb, executive producer of the new documentary film, The Streets Were My Father, a story of hopelessness and redemption. Thanks for setting us straight today. Happy Father's Day, Lee.
Same here.